Gary Schneider said, "Nature is not a place to visit, it is home." Recently I took my girlfriend to the south rim of the Grand Canyon, and I'd previously been to the more rugged north rim, and I was pleased that despite the level of touristy development on the south rim, the awesomeness of the Grand Canyon abides unencumbered. While I was there, I saw a park ranger, a young woman, reprimanding a little girl for running around off the designated path. She lectured the girl, echoing the signs all over the park, telling her what damage she would do to the microbes of the dirt. I think I see this sort of OCD more and more in our world, a view of sacred land and the sullying human. It disturbs me. Can we still be a part of this, or must we preserve and protect nature as a world separate from ourselves? How do we balance engagement, being a part of this thing, with protecting our shared lands from the heavy steps of so many people? Sorry, a bit of preamble before it. You want me to repeat it?
No, that's good. That's a great opening volley. Well, I don't think that balance is ever fixed. You know, it's like the balance in poses in yoga, where they emphatically tell you that balance changes from day to day, and from what you understand, you know, from day to day. If you block people off from the natural world, God, I have an experience exactly like yours as a child, not as a child. When our kids were little, we had a gal, a really good person, who took them all down to the Teller Wildlife Refuge in the Bitterroot Valley. And the little kids the boys were going wild, you know. And they were throwing these rocks in this slough of the Bitterroot River. And the young woman said, "Stop, stop, you don't do that. That is something's home." And she put an end to like the rock chunking. And the little boys, like especially the boys, right? They just shut down. They were ready for it to be over. So I think there has to be. I used to think there was no such thing as the Anthropocene, you know, of the human-oriented like world. But I'm more and more convinced that this is the Anthropocene, that people do have an enormous impact, and so there has to be a way to balance that out, and there has to be engagement and places where people are fully involved in the natural world and it is home, as Gary Snyder said. And then there has to be things like, and I think we've set some balances, like with Glacier National Park, with Yellowstone National Park. But to be honest with you, I have dogs, so I don't go to those places that often.
Me neither.
And I'm glad that there are places for people who can go and be visitors, not tourists, but visitors to vast natural spaces. And then we have these 640 million acres of places where people can be more of an inhabitant. And do like I'm doing, was cutting wood and maybe looking for birds. And but there has to be both, though. And there has to be some places that are, there have to be some places that at some point set aside, like if you have like the last coral route or something, you know, you don't want people going in there and logging that place and firewooding it and driving the truck across the last endangered plant, whatever it is. So you have to, but here's an idea there, is that requires incredible engagement, which we've had all the way to now in the natural world, of like naturalists and botanists and people who can tell you. I did that interview with Kyle Liebarger down in Alabama. His knowledge of the native plants there is just astounding, and it's the most like unprepossessing, undramatic plants that he knows the best. You know, so when you have knowledge like that, we can preserve things that need to be in the biological arc.
It's a sort of knowledge and depth of place that I feel like you don't get as a visitor, and you only get if you're there for a purpose. I like hiking, but I don't see when I'm hiking at the same depth that I do when I'm out doing something. And you know, a sort of maybe negative slant to it is it's consumptive, but that consumption takes me so much deeper.
That's right. It's engagement. I mean, I have a friend who ran the Bob Marshall recently from Swan Valley over to here, and I admire that. I was like, holy smokes. It's like a 52-mile run. But you know, I was like, did you see any wildlife? And he was like, no. And I was like, you know, no doubt. I remember being up on the Grand Teton one time, and we had done the Upper Exum route, and I ran into some friends of mine, and they were doing the Owen Spalding, and these are different routes on the Grand Teton, and they were going car to car, car to car. And we were crashed out. We'd spent the night up there and crashed out in whatever Ferry Meadows or whatever that's called. And I wished I was going down. It was like 100 degrees, you know. But they were car to car, and their experience of that mountain was entirely different.
Yeah, and you said there's some goal of visitation rather than tourism. Like, we were talking earlier, and you said if you want to find value, go spend 30 days in the Bob Marshall.
Yeah.
And I think that's completely right. And can you find value, and can you get that kind of closeness and understanding of the nuance and the value that exists in nature as a visitor?
I think it beats the hell out of nothing.
Okay.
And I think that for especially, well, no, I wouldn't say younger people, but children, and then wherever, but you and I were talking about literature earlier, and how some books, we didn't get to this, but how some books come to you at certain times in your life. And if you found that book as a 40-year-old, it'd be totally different than it was as an 18-year-old, like Jack Kerouac's On the Road or whatever, you know. And these experiences that people have in nature is the same thing. You never know when you're going to bring a visitor to a place, and then they end up becoming an inhabitant. You open the door, and all you can do for people is open the door, and for them, you bring them to the water, you know, assuming that they're thirsty, and then who knows what level they're drinking, right? So the answer is all of the above on that. People talk to me about trophy hunting, like I'm not. Thankfully, I'm not in huge groups of people who don't hunt. But amongst people who never hunt, or certain purists who just hunt for meat, there's no engagement with landscape like that of a person hunting a trophy mule deer.
Yeah, I've never met people who know as much about mule deer as the big buck killers.
Yeah, and I have same way the guy running across the bob. That's not my thing, but trophy mule deer is pretty close to my thing, but it's engagement in landscape. It is apprenticeship to landscape in a way that you are never. I don't think you're ever going to get if you're not hunting.